I'm going to talk for a few minutes now about a research program that Kara and I are engaged in together, which is looking at sexual orientation in the workplace. A poll commissioned by the National Post indicates that about 5% of Canadians identify themselves as being lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transsexual. And of course, we know that sexual orientation is a prohibited ground of discrimination under human rights legislation, and in 1995 was essentially read into the Charter of Rights and Freedoms by the Supreme Court of Canada. Despite this, however, there are still a lot of challenges that individuals face in the workplace because of their sexual orientation. And there's a lot of research being done in this area, new and emerging topics like sexual orientation harassment, or the risks that are involved in disclosing a gay identity at work. What Kara and I are looking at specifically are gender stereotypes of gay men and lesbians, and how those gender stereotypes influence evaluations of those individuals at work. So first, to clarify, gender stereotypes are categorical beliefs that essentially assign or ascribe characteristics to individuals on the basis of their membership in that category. So we have a category of male and a category of female, and then we ascribe a number of physical attributes, personality traits, behaviors, activities, and even occupations to individuals because we identify them as being either male or female. So for instance, women are stereotyped as possessing what are called communal personality traits. Women are warm and nurturing and caring and kind and gentle. Women are essentially caregivers. Men are stereotyped as possessing what we call agentic personality traits. Men are decisive and direct and confident and assertive. Men get things done. And there's a massive volume of research that has investigated the content of these gender stereotypes and confirmed them and reconfirmed them over decades, and they've changed very little over time. And we are looking specifically at the context of gender-type work. Now, not all work is gender-typed, but many jobs, if they have traditionally been held by one gender or the other, they come to be viewed as more suitable for that gender. So the whole reason why we hear this term male nurse is because nursing is associated with women, with being female. And so it indicates it's an aberration in some way to be a male nurse. I myself, it bothered me to no end, but I myself, as a lawyer, was frequently referred to as a lady lawyer. Really irritated me. And of course now, in my studies, I understand why that is the case, because it still is a normatively male-dominated occupation. I tend to be a pacer, and I'm good without the clicker. Okay, thank you. Okay, so what happens is when individuals are employed in an occupation, which is gender atypical or gender inconsistent, meaning when women are employed in male-type jobs or men are employed in female-type jobs, negative appraisals occur of an individual because they're seen as a poor fit. And this is because we assume that in order to be successful in a male-type job, like engineering, for example, or firefighter, or any of the many jobs that we still associate primarily with men, we assume that you need these male characteristics in order to be competent in those jobs. And we assume that women don't possess those male characteristics. So what research has shown across studies consistently is that when women are employed in male-type jobs, they are rated less competent than their male counterparts, despite the fact that their performance may be described identically. They are still given lower ratings of competence. When extra information is provided that states unequivocally that this woman is successful in this job, she will now be rated competent, but she is now rated interpersonally hostile and unlikable. And we have a 5-letter word that starts with E that we use to describe women who exhibit these male characteristics of assertiveness and decisiveness and strength and aggression. We have a word that describes those women that are successful in male-type jobs. Now, before all the women, oh, go ahead.
Clarify, who is doing the rating when you say this?
I'm I'm going to get right to that. It's a good question, and I'm actually going to go right to that now. Thank you. Before all the women turn and give all the men the evil eye, there's two important things we have to consider. And one is that it is not just men that are giving women poor ratings in these jobs. Women are also giving other women poor ratings. So what this means is myself as a female lawyer, and while I view myself as being just as competent as any of my male colleagues, probably view myself as being more competent. I, without realizing it, without being conscious of it, would assume that my female colleagues are less competent than my male colleagues. And in all of the studies, when researchers have compared, so when it's males that are rating the female target and male targets, and when it's female participants rating the male and female targets, there's been no gender differences. So, and this is because these stereotypes are so pervasive. And because stereotypes are referred to as or considered to be collective beliefs, which are separate from our own personal beliefs. So whether or not you agree with them or whether or not you endorse them, they're still here in the background and they're influencing your judgments and decisions anyway, right, without you being consciously aware of it. The second thing we need to consider is that men do not escape these negative appraisals. And there's research that shows that when men are employed in female-type jobs, they are viewed as wimpy and undeserving of respect. So they experience, they're experiencing this backlash as well. So what Kara and I really noticed when we were reviewing this research is that no one, well, at least no published studies have accounted for sexual orientation. And we know that there's research that shows that homosexual individuals are actually more likely to choose gender atypical work than heterosexuals are. But yet no one's looked at that as a factor. And given the heterosexual norm, which is the norm that everyone is heterosexual unless you're given evidence to the contrary, all of these studies have really just been employing heterosexuals. So the target who's being rated on competence or likability, we're assuming they're heterosexual. So what we are doing in our research is we're going to compare in male-type jobs and female-type jobs, we're going to compare how a heterosexual female is rated in a male-type job with how a lesbian is rated in a male-type job. And this is important because there is clear research that indicates that gender stereotypes of homosexual individuals are opposite those of heterosexual individuals. So the stereotypes I've described for you only apply to heterosexuals. Consistently, in studies that examine gender stereotypes of gay men and women, show that while we assume that straight women are feminine, have these feminine qualities, we assume lesbians are masculine, highly masculine, and we will describe lesbians as being more similar to heterosexual men than to heterosexual women. And we also assume that gay men are highly feminine, and we will describe them in more similar terms more similar to heterosexual women than to heterosexual men. So we have this inversion of their gender. And what Kara and I want to look at is how does this influence then ratings of competence and likability when they're in gender atypical work. So Kara and I have designed a series of studies that we are in the midst of currently, and we have a number of hypotheses, but essentially what they're all getting at is this general research question of whether sexual orientation or knowledge of sexual orientation changes ratings of competence and likability for individuals that are engaged in gender-type work, and particularly gender atypical work. And we think this is important work for us to be engaged in because there's nothing published on this so far, and as well because increasingly more individuals are going into gender inconsistent or gender atypical jobs. There's a larger migration of women into male-type jobs, but this is believed to be because male-type work tends to be higher paid and more prestigious than traditional female-type jobs. And again, as I said before, research suggests that homosexual individuals have a greater preference for gender atypical work. And so ultimately, when this research is done, the next question will be then, how can we prevent, or what is more likely, how can we reduce the impact that these stereotypes have on our ratings of individuals, because they're having a significant impact on performance evaluations and promotion decisions. And then of course, This is going to lead to something that Diana alluded to, which is systemic discrimination, where we see people who are not getting to the top, or we see a lot of diversity in lower levels, and when we move up the organization, the closer and closer we get to the top, it starts to become very uniform, but we can't put a finger on why. And a lot of times it's things like gender stereotypes that are just operating in the background that we're not even aware of. That's it. Thank you.